Imam Ali and Rabbi Schneier, I know that after 9/11, many of us in the Jewish community, perhaps especially those of us already engaged in interfaith dialogue with the Christian and African American communities, understood that the American Muslim community now required our presence by their side. For each of you, I know that 9/11 played an important role in shaping your own sense of mission and purpose. How did your work to begin to change at that point? Rabbi Schneier, maybe you would begin, and then Imam Ali.
I think you're being very gracious and benevolent in your question in terms of describing the Jewish community back in 2011. I find that very few, not only Jews, but particularly Jewish leaders, had that sensitivity to reach out to the American Muslim community. And if they did, they were clueless as to how to begin.
Yeah.
That's one of the great challenges I still find to this very day. Many of my colleagues, I should say many of our colleagues, who are so involved in Christian-Jewish understanding, who are involved in relations with the Vatican, when it comes to reaching out to the Muslim population, they are literally clueless. They just don't know how to begin, what to do, or they're just ambivalent and indifferent. You know, where there's such a focus on dialogue with the church, the Catholic Church. We have no issues today with the Catholic Church. You know, the Pope's greatest challenge in Rome is when he meets and he probably greets more Jewish delegations than any other faith community, is which kosher restaurant should he order from? You know, from the ghetto in Rome. You know, that's his greatest challenge today. We have no issues, and here you have this glaring conflict. And as I repeated, you look at the Jewish communities in France, look at what just happened in Brussels. Look at the UK, Germany, throughout Europe. This is an existentialist challenge that's now facing the Jewish people. And you would think that Jewish leaders would be giving of their time, their energy, and resources. So I think that, you know, the two of us have set this example. I'm thrilled that more and more, particularly in the leadership of the Jewish community, are looking to us in terms of ways to begin this process, either for their organizations or for themselves. But as I pointed out before, you know, we're at the very beginning of this journey. And I would hope that those of you who are joining us here this evening, that you'll walk away with just a greater sensitivity as to why this has become such a critical issue, particularly to the Jewish people worldwide.
You know, it is true that after 9/11, there were a lot of us within the Jewish community, clearly not as many as one would hope. I think you're right. But those of us who were interested in trying to reach out to the American Muslim community, many of us didn't know where to go at the outset. And I was at Central Synagogue at the time, and I remember being told that next to a Middle Eastern restaurant on 55th Street, there was a mosque that was, I think, led by an Egyptian imam at the time. So I walked over there, and I introduced myself. The community reached out to you because the community knew that they needed to be present for the American Muslim community. You didn't necessarily need to reach back, but you clearly did. 9/11 played an important role in shaping your sense of mission and purpose. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, certainly. Let me begin by acknowledging that I think the most challenging part of this journey is fighting against our own pre-existing misperception about the other. You know, as I said that before I came to this country, or let me say, when I came to this country, I found a very big dilemma among the Muslim community that we are coming to our houses of worship while neighbors don't know what we are doing, because there is no outreach program. We never go out and knock the door introducing ourselves. So what I did when I led the small community in Astoria was knocking the door of a church nearby. But I have to be honest that when it comes to the Muslim-Jewish relations, the mistrust that we have, that these two communities have, is so deep, and for whatever the reasons. And I think mostly because of media, mostly because of politics, but also the literal fashion of understanding of the religious text that we have. So it's really difficult to fight against that misconception about the Jewish community. When I met Rubenstein in 2003, for example, we have a three-faith dialogue at the Marble Collegiate Church. I didn't have that really sustainable motives, if you may say, or wish to develop these relations until we met Rabbi Marc Schneier in 2005. And the reason is because that mistrust is very, very deep. And that is the most challenging part of that, until now. I still remember, by the way, when and I mentioned this several times on different occasions, that when we wanted to go to his synagogue, in the New York synagogue at the time, I announced to our congregation at the 96th Street Mosque, and an Egyptian Muslim stood up, and he said, "Are you kidding us?" I said, "I'm serious." He said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "We are going to the synagogue." He said, No, we don't go." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because these people are claiming to be chosen." And his understanding, in his own understanding of chosenness, means exclusiveness, means, arrogance, means don't want to befriend, and so on and so forth. So I remember a verse in the Holy Quran that says, and I mentioned that in the book, that we have that concept of khairu ummah. It means that Muslims are claiming to be the best nation. So kuntum khaira ummatin. This is in chapter number 3 of the Holy Quran. So I said to him, since we feel that we are the best, let the best meet the chosen. So we went to a synagogue, and I still remember, I know the guy who sat at the corner of the synagogue, because it was a building, and after the service we have discussions, and after the discussion we have kiddush. So we have a lot of food. And so we went back to the mosque, and he said, that's beautiful. Not only that they receive us smilingly, but they gave us kiddush. They didn't say kiddush, but food. They gave us food. I said, that's what Jews are. And so, but also I remember when I was in the synagogue, and after the presentation, he was challenged by his own congregations about the Amalekite, right? But one lady stood up, and I still remember that she said to me, it is impossible for us Jews to be peaceful with Muslims. So I was trying to smile as beautiful as much. And I said to her, why is that? She said, because you guys have a midrash, where you train your kid to hate, not only to hate, but she said to kill us. So I said to her, first of all, I am also a madrasa graduate. Okay. Secondly, how did you come to that conclusion? And she said, because I watch a movie. And in that movie, it talks about, how madrasa students are being radicalized, and hating Jews and so on and so forth. And so I said to her, come to the mosque, meet the Muslims. I think you need to challenge that perception that you have in your mind right now. Rather than I'm talking to you, why you don't come to the mosque? So she came to the mosque. And she is now one of the participants, if not mistaken. It's called Salam Shalom Sisterhood. One of the ladies that very much involved in that meeting between ladies. Sometimes meeting, talking about food, talking about how to raise the kids, the ladies. So my point is that, September 11 really changed. And, but I think September 11 is just a factor. The real changes happen basically because we want to fight it. And I think this is what, I consider this is the biggest jihad for me, to fight my own pre-existent perception about the others.
Thank you. In fact, there are some people from Salam Shalom who are here, and it's a real great honor to have you here. All right, for those of you who are fans of The Bachelor and The Bachelorette, and you don't have to raise your hands, You know that television shows are not always the best way to bring people together in lasting relationships. Most of those couples never actually make it. Rabbi Schneier and Imam Ali may be one of the few pairs who met on television and are still together. So, Imam Ali, why don't you tell us how it is that the two of you met?
Yes, as I mentioned that, when I met several rabbis prior to my meeting with Rabbi Marc Schneier, I didn't really take it very seriously, although I consider them great people, Rabbi Potasnik, Rabbi Rubenstein, and others. But towards the end of 2005, I was invited to a CBS television studio to an interview about Pope John's outreach, interfaith outreach. I didn't realize that there would be another person coming to the interview. And suddenly, a rabbi came in. He was very young, now still young. So he was introduced to me by someone, and really he extended his hand, but barely looking at my face. Almost we didn't look at each other. And then we separated. We exchanged cards. After some months, I heard his voice came to 96. I was an assistant imam at the 96th Street. He met with my boss at the time, Imam Abu Namus, invited him to his synagogue. And then, to make the story short, he sent his assistant some months later to invite me to an interfaith dialogue, Jewish-Muslim dialogue at the NYU, where we are, along with Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Imam Latif. From that moment, to be honest, as I met other rabbis, I feel that this rabbi represent what does religion means. It is about honesty. It is about friendship. It is about embracing one another. It's about building partnership. And not only that, but basically what he said is about fighting for others. And what he told me in private, as he told people in public. So our trust grows and grows and grows since then. But the challenge that later on came on. The challenge is that every time that I went to the synagogue, my own congregants really challenged me. Do you really trust the Jewish people? So I asked him why. He said, this is what the Quran says. This is what the hadith, the Prophet Muhammad said about the Jewish people. And he was challenged also by his own congregations. Do you really trust the Muslims? So we met to talk about this, how to respond to our own congregations. And so we came up with an idea of exchanging questions, Q&A. What is the chosenness? What is the Khayr Ummah? What jihad is all about? What Sharia? How is the woman in the Muslim tradition? And then we decided to write the book, and that's why we came up with the book. So basically, the book was the result of that challenge that we are facing in our own respective communities, because we are challenged. Until now, as the Rabbi mentions, that the journey is far away, the dreamland is still far away, but the good things that we have begun.
Finding a partner for interfaith dialogue is a challenging thing. You really are, in many ways, putting some part of your own career in your partner's hands. There is an element of trust that is implicit in such a relationship. And then when you find the right partner, it is such an extraordinary gift. So, Marc, how did you decide that Shamsi that this was the partnership that you really were going to move forward with?
I remember, as you might all recall, when the Jewish Community Center, the Chabad Center in Mumbai, in India was attacked, and that lovely rabbinic couple, I believe the Holtzbergs, were massacred. It was the Imam who called me. The attacks took place on late Wednesday. And he said, I'd like you to come to the mosque on Friday. And the mosque on Friday, here on 96th Street, 1 o'clock service, there are more than 2,000 people. More than 2,000 people. I often would comment to my congregation, I'm amazed, 2,000 people and no Kiddush. I mean, nothing. I mean, at the Hampton Synagogue, that would be an impossibility, to have, we always say what has become the secret of our success of 3 words, Kiddush to follow, right? But seriously.
Remember that.
So at the mosque, 2,000 people, Muslims from across the spectrum, from all over the city. And the Imam asked that I address the audience. We had the ambassador of India there with us. And if you know my nature, my character, I pull no punches. And I spoke about when acts of violence, particularly acts of anti-Semitism, are perpetrated from within the Muslim community, then it's not the responsibility of Jews to speak out. It's not the responsibility of Christians to speak out, but it's the responsibility of Muslims to speak out and to hold members of their own community and their faith accountable, just as we would do the same if, God forbid, there were or there are attacks emanating from the Jewish community against Muslims. And I'm sure the Imam will be happy to share with you our famous rally. In fact, I shouldn't tell that story. Well, why don't you tell the story about with Peter King and the hearings? Yeah, well, why don't you tell the story?
I think it was in 2000, I forgot, but when Peter King organized a hearing in Congress about the radicalization of the Muslim communities in the United States, it's really bad on us because we look like all of us radicals. And so the Rabbi came to me and he said, you know what, I wanted to do something. So I said, what are you going to do? I think in the beginning he said that, let's do press conference. But then we thought that we have done that a lot. So finally he came up with an idea of organizing a rally in Times Square. So we did prepare, and during the day we had thousands of participants came out in the rainy day. Russell Simmons, many other stars came with Jews, Christians, and Hindus and Buddhists. And this is the man basically behind that rally. He is the one stood there saying that if an attack on any community, in the Muslim community, is an attack on all of us, Americans. And the theme of the rally on that day was, today I am a Muslim too. And I still remember Russell Simmons tweet out saying, today I'm a Muslim too. And his Twitter was received by Kardashian, and she also tweeted out saying, I am a Muslim too. So the word I'm a Muslim too went all over the Hollywood people, and it was really a tremendous thing for the Muslim community. So that's the Rabbi. But it's not only that. Everywhere, basically, for Muslim community being as, we have to say that we are now in a very challenging moment. Internally speaking, we are facing radical tendencies because of the anger, for many reasons. There are too much anger within the Muslim community and ignorant at the same time. But from outside, we tended to be misconceived that Muslims are not really doing something against radical tendencies in the Muslim community. So to have a Jewish rabbi standing to our side, supporting the Muslim community, and saying that anything that is against the Muslims, against us, is really boosting our spirit. And that's, for me, it has become an individual responsibility to say that any anti-Semitism occur anywhere else is an attack on me also as a Muslim. And any Muslim denies Holocaust, for example, is a denial of my own rights. And I think this is something this is our motto. It is fighting for each other.
And if I just might add, which was one of the highlights of our friendship, that this past November 9th, I was invited to be the keynote speaker in the Austrian Parliament in Vienna. It was the 75th anniversary of Kristallnacht. And my family is originally from Vienna. My father was born in Vienna. And there were generations of rabbis in Vienna. So when I accepted the invitation of the Jewish community, I asked if I could bring the imam with me. And let's remember, this is not the United States. This is Austria. And let's put this in a certain context. Today in Austria, there are 8 million people. At best, there are 15,000 Jews. And depending on what figures you believe, there are between 600,000 and 800,000 Muslims and growing. And you're also dealing with a Muslim community that is completely, totally ignorant when it comes to the Holocaust and when it comes to Kristallnacht. So when the Imam got up to speak in Vienna, they thought this Imam was from Mars. They never heard any Muslim cleric and leader the way he was unequivocal in his condemnation of anti-Semitism. The way Imam Shamsi Ali referenced the deafening silence, not only of the Christian world, of the Muslim world during Kristallnacht. And then at a luncheon that was held in our honor for the various religious leaders of Austria, it was the Imam and I who got the president of the Austrian Muslim community, Dr. Senya, to agree, and this was reported, in the media, that by next Kristallnacht, there will be some form of Kristallnacht/Holocaust education that will be introduced in Austrian Muslim schools. Wow. That's the work that we look to inspire. That's the work that we look to elevate. Again, it's about fighting for the other. Whether I'm speaking out on behalf of the Muslim community or whether it's the Imam speaking out on behalf of the Jewish community.
Let's talk about some of the toughest nuts to crack. There are challenges to bringing the Muslim and Jewish communities together. As much as we might be passionate about it, our flocks aren't always so eager. What have you found to be some of the most effective ways of dealing with such potentially divisive issues as the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, those challenging verses in the Hebrew Bible or the Quran, and that notion of Jews as the chosen people and Muslims as the best nation, and then outright bigotry? How have you tried to address those sorts of things? Imam Ali, why don't you begin, and then Rabbi Schneier.
It reminds me when we organized the first summit of imams and rabbis in the United States under the auspices of his Foundation for Ethnic Understanding at the 96th Street Mosque. We met from 9 o'clock in the morning to 12 o'clock, and almost none spoke anything else but Israel and Palestine. So just imagine 25 imams and 25 rabbis. Looks like nothing else issue between us except Palestine and Israel. So finally, both of us intervened. So we have to intervene because almost nothing else that we talk about. So the issue basically, particularly when we talk about the conflict in the Middle East, and particularly Palestinian and Israeli conflict, the issue is what I used to call the 800 gorilla in the room. It is the most dividing factor between Muslims and Jews. But unfortunately, I think I disagree who says that our relations must be defined by this conflict. Because these conflicts began what? When? These relations between Jews and Muslims started from long time before any conflict that took place in the Middle East. So to say that our relations, Muslims-Jewish relations, must be defined by Palestinian and Israeli conflict, I think is too naive, and I think we have to change it. Okay. Now, when we come to the issue of some verses of the Holy Quran, I think, and certainly also when it comes to the verses of the Bible, the key word to that is education. Imagine what happened in Nigeria recently. in the name of Islam, that people kept, how you call, kidnap girls, and in the name of the Holy Quran, in the name of Islam. So look at that. So as a person who studied this religion since my childhood, and I memorized the Holy Quran, the whole Holy Quran, this book, I never found any verse in the Holy Quran says that, take anyone else and make them slaves, But this is what's happening. This is what's happening. So I think it's about education. It's about ignorance, understanding of our religion, and this is one of the biggest challenges that I feel as my own responsibility to face. But don't forget that media also plays an important role. We want the media to be more responsible in educating our communities. When I received the rabbis and I embraced him as my great friend, you didn't see that on the front page of New York Times or New York Post. But when there's an imam somewhere in Peshawar talk evil about others, you will see that in the front page of representing Islam. Looks like that imam is representing Islam. That's the way media present our community. Similarly, when I was in Saudi Arabia, pick up the newspapers and nothing else good about the Jewish people. Everything is bad. And that's the media. It happens both in both worlds, about the Muslims and about the non-Muslims in the Muslim world. And I think it's a challenge for us, Muslims and non-Muslims, the Jewish particularly, and the Muslims, that we must work together in educating our media people, to educate our community. But finally, coming back again to the issue of history, I think we have misread the history in many ways. We are concentrating on the dark spot of the history, the dark part of our history. We forgot that Muslims and Jews in the past used to have honeymoon together. We used to live together beautifully, sweetly. But then when we come to these days, because of the many factors that I mentioned, we say, no, we've never been friends. And that's what in the minds of the ladies that I met in Rabbi's synagogues, that we, Jewish people, will never be peaceful with the Muslims because there's a kind of mindset. So this is very challenging, and we are determined that we are going to face those challenges.
Marc?
First, we need to acknowledge that there are a host of issues that transcend the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And understand, we do not eschew addressing this conflict, but there needs to be a recognition that as the children of Abraham, not only do we share a common faith, but we share a common fate, and how our single destiny must strengthen our bonds of concern, compassion, and caring for each other. I'll give you 3 examples just in the last 4 months. In January, the European affiliate of the Foundation for Ethnic Understanding, which is known as the Gathering of European Muslim and Jewish Leaders. These are Muslim and Jewish leader representatives from 25 of the 29 EU states. I led in January the first joint Muslim-Jewish coalition to the Council of Europe in Strasbourg to meet with the Secretary General. The Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe had just passed legislation that would prohibit ritual circumcision for both Muslims and Jews. And fortunately, we and others were successful in seeing this resolution defeated, but we were the only voice that spoke collectively on behalf of Muslims and Jews. And I remember when the Secretary General of the European Council, as we left the room, he said, "Rabbi, I have to tell you something. Had I closed my eyes, I would not have known the difference between the rabbis and the imams." Perfect example. February, we took on the government of Denmark. Denmark passed legislation of all countries that would prohibit the ritual slaughtering of animals in terms of halal and kashrut. And again, this coalition was the only joint Muslim-Jewish voice to meet sit down with the Minister of Agriculture, and our negotiations continue. But again, when government leaders, when they see that it's not just Jews speaking for Jews and Muslims just speaking for Muslims, but the fact that it is a collective voice, that we have that synergy and that fusion, it really speaks volumes. And then, which we can discuss later, when I met with President Abbas, in April, and I must tell you, I had no intent whatsoever to even bring up the Holocaust, whatsoever. So it happens, I was in Israel for Passover, which I'm usually there. I know at Emanu-El, you have an advantage, that I don't have. You have only one Seder. When I'm in this country as an Orthodox Rabbi, an Orthodox Jew, I have to have two Seders. But when I go to Israel, I get away with one Seder. It's one of my great incentives of going to Israel for Pesach. So when I got the call from my friend, the Palestinian ambassador in Washington, that President Abbas would like to see me, so I brought two of my friends with me. One's from Vienna, one's from Toronto. And I really went to see Abbas to enlist his support on the whole Denmark Shlita issue. Because I always remind President Abbas, you're not only the Palestinian leader, you're also a Muslim leader. And you have a certain responsibility as a Muslim to speak out on behalf of the Jewish community. Again, nothing to do with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So I'm sitting there, and then it's like I had an epiphany, because myself and my two friends were both, the three of us are sons of Holocaust survivors. So I said to President Abbas, we were discussing how important it is to be empathetic. It's one of the principal lessons of the Passover Seder experience, right? We say, "B'chol dor v'dor chayav adam lirot et atzmo ki'ilu hu yet." So we have to see ourselves as though we were the slaves, to develop an empathetic imagination. And I said to President Abbas, next week is Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day. And it would be so significant for you as the president of the Palestinian people to express your solidarity, express your sympathy to the Jewish people on what is probably, our most tragic day of the year. And before I could finish the sentence, he starts going on and on. He says, "Rabbi, I want you to know how I feel about the Holocaust. It's the most, as far as I'm concerned, it's the most tragic date. I mean, it's the most tragic, it's the greatest tragedy in the modern day era. And, I fully, express my sympathy." So I said, "President Abbas, don't just share that with me. Why don't you let the Jewish world know?" That's when he called in the Secretary of the Cabinet, and the rest is history. So even to combat Holocaust denial is one of those issues that transcends the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But getting back, and with this I'll conclude, to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, both the Imam and I believe, and we've said this publicly many, many times, not if, but when Israel and Palestinians do arrive at some resolution, at some peace plan, how will this resolution be implemented? How will it be executed when a majority of Muslims don't trust Jews, a majority of Jews don't trust Muslims? And one of the reasons for this underlying mistrust is our lack of understanding and our misperceptions of our sacred texts. When Muslims believe that we represent ourselves as the chosen people, and they understand chosenness to be superior and better and to be elitist, or as you said, to be arrogant, how could you expect the Muslim community to trust the other? As Jews, if we believe that the Quran speaks so disparagingly about Jews and Christians, how can we possibly trust the other? And one of the most valuable lessons that I learned from this man in writing this book with him for 3 years and studying the Quran backwards and forwards, that just like we have an oral text, right? We have the oral law, we have the written law, then we have the oral law, and you need the oral law to interpret the written law. Islam is no different. Islam is no different. Not a single person in this room would dare to interpret the Torah in a literal fashion. Not one of you. How would you explain an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, if you didn't have the oral law? How would you explain the way we are commanded to destroy the Amalekites if Maimonides had not interpreted that particular verse to mean, yes, to destroy Amalek-like behavior, not the physical Amalekite, and I can go on and on and on. So all I ask is that you extend the same courtesy when it comes to the Quran. Extend the same courtesy. And before you look at the literal text of the Quran, and then you arrive at certain judgments, first ask either an Islamic scholar or look in the Islamic codes and see what is the oral interpretation, what is the oral explanation. And if we can get more and more Jews and Muslims to understand how our two religions both have that same dynamic, written and oral, I think that would help create a new paradigm for greater understanding between Muslims and Jews.
Thank you for speaking about that. My previous pulpit, I handed a passage from Deuteronomy to my congregants, which talked about the destruction of the Canaanite peoples, and I said, "Where do you think this comes from?" And when I told them it came from the Torah, so it's such an important point to understand that just as we have Torah, Shebaal Peh, the oral Torah, the Muslim tradition has the Hadith and its oral interpretations too. So it's easy to get stuck on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, as obviously happened in that gathering, but Muslims and Jews have so much in common, from the immigrant experience and the effort of one generation to help their children make it in America without losing their own religious identity, to concerns about minority rights at home and obviously peace abroad. In your view, what are the present-day needs and events that should unite Muslims and Jews? So, Imam Ali, why don't you begin, and then Rabbi Schneier.
I think we have every reason to say that this community are two communities are the most identical communities of all, from theological perspective down to even cultures and traditions that both communities have. And so to say that it is truly difficult to unite these two communities, I think that's what the challenge is, to change our own mindset. And as I said earlier, that I think the most challenging is to change our mindset. And that is really, for me, as I said, my background is this, coming to the situation right now, is really challenging. It's not about what the people said about our engagement, about our friendship, but it's about our own. And that is the most difficult part of it, to change the perceptions that we had about other. And so, coming back again, I think if we just can go beyond the dividing lines, as you mentioned about, not going beyond doesn't mean that we don't pay attention. The issue of Palestine and Israel is very crucial to both communities. We have passions, both of us, and I think the only question to both communities that we need to ask is, do you want peace? And I'm sure that both communities want peace, although we may have different ways of how to get into that promised land, the peace. but both communities want peace, and that's why at least that we have a good intention to engage in a peaceful dialogue and go beyond just dialogue, but partnership, but even not only partnership, but even fighting for the others. One of the dilemma that I have seen in the past about the conflict in the Middle East is about the victims mentality, how you call it, that we feel that we are the one who are victims and others are not. You ask the Muslims, or we are victims, and certainly the others as well. They have that kind of mentalities. I think that what we need to do is challenging ourselves to put our feet on the shoes of others. And I think that's the best way. And I mentioned that in my book, that this is number one. Number two, the conflict in the Middle East, unfortunately, had been politicized by outsiders in many ways. And as Muslims, I know that there are many Muslim leaders in the Muslim world tend to use Palestinian issue for their own political purposes. The denial of Holocaust, for example, by President of Iran a few years back, has nothing to do with Islam, it's nothing to do possibly with Iranian people, but for his own gain, to show that he's a hero for Palestinian people. So it had been taken for political interest by some leaders around the world. So I think, again, coming back, there are many reasons to be together. There are many reasons to be united, and I think there are less reasons to be divided.
Rabbi Schneier?
I think it's so critical to be able to have these lines, open lines of communication. And I'll even give you a little media scoop, which will be, I've been told, which will be coming out in the Israeli press on Friday. It's a conversation I had, but I'm comfortable enough to have a conversation, even to come up with what some might consider some creative yet crazy ideas. So back in November, after we were in Vienna, so the Imam was supposed to go with me to Jerusalem, but we're both congregational officiants, and we both know that if the congregation needs us, we have to come home. So I was fortunate. I wasn't needed in the Hamptons that week. But the Imam, he had a wedding. I think it was the president of your mosque, his daughter. Okay. And what happened that the president of Israel, Shimon Peres, had a beautiful reception at his residence to celebrate the publication of the book. The following day, that was on a Tuesday evening, Wednesday, we were scheduled to meet with President Abbas in Ramallah, who was going to do the same thing. So when I arrived in Jerusalem, I was informed President Abbas has left the country. So Rabbi, you're going to be meeting with the new Palestinian Prime Minister, Rami Abdallah, who, as you know, has been asked by President Abbas to work with the very controversial new Palestinian government, which I'll be happy to discuss, later. So I go to Ramallah. I'm sitting in the Prime Minister's office. He's a lovely gentleman. He's the former president of the University of Nablus. And he made me feel very much at home. Very warm conversation. And I said, let's talk about these peace negotiations. I said, look, I get it when it comes to the settlements. I'm sure there's some resolution we can work out. Even right of return, we can come up with some symbolic number. But or swaps. But I said to the Prime Minister, I said, the city of Jerusalem, you need to understand that for the Jewish people, Jerusalem is not some 66-year-old political aspiration. It's at the very heart of our religion. It's at the very core of Judaism. Our synagogues are oriented toward Jerusalem. Our two holy temples were built in Jerusalem. And we pray 3 times a day for the rebuilding of Jerusalem, how Jerusalem is in the forefront of Jewish consciousness, Jewish hopes, and Jewish dreams. And then, Josh, I had an epiphany. Had to be God. Had to be God. That's what they're writing about. I looked at the Prime Minister, I said, however this situation is resolved, and I'm not going to get involved, I'll leave that up to you and the politicians. I'd like to suggest the following. In addition to negotiating the territorial rights to the city, however you politicians work that out, I believe that we should also negotiate the naming rights to the city. And I looked at the Prime Minister, I said, I'm going to be quite open. As an American Jew, if I saw a map of Palestine with the capital, Jerusalem, I wouldn't feel terribly comfortable. But if I saw a map of Palestine and the capital is Al-Quds, which I know from my friend Imam Shamsi Ali is the Islamic name of Jerusalem, Al-Quds, by all means. And I said, from an emotional, psychological point of view, why don't we negotiate where we own our name and you own your name? However it's divided, however you guys work it out. Whatever is worked out, you have Al-Quds. And we keep the name Jerusalem. So it's actually coming out in the Israeli press on Friday, this idea of, in addition to the territorial rights, that we should also address the naming rights to the city. But the point I'm trying to make, that I felt comfortable enough, I could never have felt this way before I met my friend Imam and before our work together. But when you sit down with other leaders of the Muslim community, you do feel that there is a certain familial bond. I remember the king of Bahrain once saying to me, you know what, Rabbi? At the end of the day, we're cousins. We may have had a few family disagreements, but we're cousins and we're family. And we need to try and bring that spirit and that sense of family back into the dynamic of Muslim-Jewish relations.
Well said. And I'm curious as to what the reaction to you.
We'll see. We'll see.
Wonderful.
If I apply for a rabbinic position at Emanu-El, you'll know.
All right, we're going to take some questions from all of you. Won't get to too many, but a couple of them. This one's of a different nature. And so here it is. I'm Jewish and my fiance is Muslim. What advice can you give us as an interfaith couple to find welcoming religious communities where we can worship together and raise kids in an accepting, open environment?
That's definitely yours.
I think I would like to start by saying that I do believe in that religion is private, is a personal. I do believe that choosing a religion is a very much a private choice, a personal choice. And so when someone marries of different religious traditions, I think first they have to understand that it is about choice. And in our understanding as Muslims, I'm a Muslim not because my parents are Muslims. In my understanding, I'm a Muslim because I choose to be Muslims. And I understand the religion, and I have self-conviction that the religion is good, is great for me, and that's why I'm a Muslim. And so when someone else chooses other religions, I have to have some similar respect, as I wanted to be respected. So I think what you need to do is you need to respect one another. You need to understand one another's traditions. But there is a crucial thing, and that is about learning of one another. Because before, you are now fiancé, not yet husband and wife, or when you become a husband and a wife, then you are going to live under the same roof in 24 hours. At that moment, everything will be exposed. You know, things that you don't know about your spouse, you're going to know everything else because you are living under the same roof. So you need to learn about your spouse, about their tradition, about their cultures. Through learning, you're going to build an understanding. Only by understanding one another, we are going to have real compassion, real, feelings of love and compassion. And through love and compassion, we can build partnership. Not only that, you are going to slowly build what I used to call, when I advise couples, you're going to slowly build humbleness of one another. And the meaning of humbleness, that you appreciate of one another. You appreciate that my spouse is even better than me, and I'm not perfect. That's why she is or he is there to make me perfect. And so don't worry about the different traditions, different religions. It's just about how to manage differences. Diversity, difference is a blessing, but sometimes we fail to manage our differences.
Please. Well, we can look forward to when Ramadan and Yom Kippur, coincide. We can do that. Look, as an Orthodox rabbi, I firmly believe that it's important to have one religion in the home. And I must tell you that if I would have been given the question of Jewish Christian or Jewish Muslim, as I mentioned before, Jews and Muslims, both in terms of theology, in terms of practice, we have much more in common. Our dietary laws, my friend prays 5 times a day. I pray 3 times a day. Somehow I can work it out where it's only twice a day. We can get Mincha Marav, so it's only twice a day. We face Jerusalem, you face Mecca, you have your Hajj, we used to have our Aliyah. So there are many, many similarities. But if that couple would like to discuss this with me privately, I'm more than happy to discuss it.
Well said. Well said. Imam Ali, what is your advice for many young people that want to make a difference in their native Muslim countries where there's violence between different religious groups, for example, Pakistan? How can people get involved to try to shape?
I think we need to start from our own home here in the United States of America. United States is still considered the sole superpower in the world. So that any small thing that we can do here in New York particularly can have a big impact. As the Rabbi mentioned that if I have occasionally from time to time to go back to Indonesia, really feel people in Indonesia feel that have done quite big things in the United States of America because I can build relations with Jews, with Christians, with others. And for Indonesians, this is a tremendously big thing because they never imagined that an Indonesian can do that here in the United States. So what I would like to say to that brother or sister that, start from here. If you are a Muslim here in this country, go out and be friends with your neighbors. Be nice. Just show them what does it mean to be Muslim, what does it mean to be a good person. And in my own definition of Muslims, simply this: being humble to God and humble to others. Serve your Lord and serve others. Because if you are able to serve God, but you fail to serve humanity, that service of God is kind of questionable. There's a big question. Is really serving God? And that's why when you pray, for example, when a Muslim pray, we began with saying Allahu Akbar, and this means God is greatest. But that prayer will not be accepted unless we turn our face to the right and to the left and say Assalamu alaikum, or peace be unto you. So you see these two aspects of service. Service your Lord and service humanity. And so that's what you need to start from here. And then impact your community. And I mean back home in Pakistan.
I want to close our evening tonight with a lesson from the Muslim tradition that I learned with one of the groups that I studied with the mosque and the synagogue in northern Westchester. And the lesson is that Muhammad taught that even if the world is coming to an end tomorrow, each of us must plant a seed today. And if someone asks us, why are you planting a seed when the world is coming to an end, we are to answer, because there must always be hope. Now, you won't be surprised to learn that a similar text exists in the Talmud. One day, Honi went walking and came upon an old man planting a carob tree. He inquired, "How long till this tree bears fruit?" The man answered, 70 years. Honi asked, "Do you believe that you will live to see it?" The man replied, "As my ancestors planted for me, so I plant for my children." It's a beautiful message, but the story doesn't end there. Honi sat down and he fell asleep, and he slept for 70 years. When he awoke, he saw a man picking fruit from the tree and asked him, "Are you the same man who planted this tree?" "No," the man answered, "I'm his grandson." The two of you are the planters of the seeds. Your book is one of those seeds of hope. Universal understanding doesn't come easily, but one day we too will awaken to a new reality. And if we should not, then at least we will have planted seeds for our children and grandchildren, because there must always be hope. Please join me in thanking Imam Shamsi, Rabbi Marc,
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support Shalom TV with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the Shalom TV website homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive on DVD with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.